Welcome to another It's Time podcast, a production of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs. Podcast today is a little bit different in that in this podcast, we are again flipping the interview process, so I am being interviewed. So we have with us Jennifer Buelow Fischer, who has responsibility for a lot of our undergraduate programs. She's made a lot of our wonderful stuff happen, all of the internships that we now require of our undergraduate students that really separates it as something that she's had tremendous responsibility for. Tell us just a little bit about what you do at the university, and then we'll move into you get to interview me about negotiations.
Well, I am looking forward to interviewing you, Dale. So as Dale said, I'm Jennifer. I work with our undergraduate program, and what that means essentially is I work with students from before they even want to come to UW-Oshkosh. Maybe they're just thinking about it. They're a high school student, they're a transfer student, they're at another institution, maybe want to come to UWO. And having conversations with, is this the right fit, all the way through graduation, internships, scholarships, professional development, working with faculty, curriculum management. How does it all come together for a good undergraduate student experience? So, in a nutshell, that's what I do. And we're talking today because one of those things that we help students with, or try to help students with, is career readiness and life readiness. Right? What happens in the real world, so to speak.
Right.
So one of those things is negotiations. And we were talking before, a negotiation, sometimes the notion is, this is a one-off thing, and I'm going to get the best deal I can. So help us understand, what is the difference between a one-off negotiation where you're buying a car and a negotiation where you're negotiating for your first salary or your first buyer in a job?
As we think of negotiations, you've described it very well. That there are some negotiations that are one-off, and I have an objective, you have an objective, those objectives are diametrically opposed. You want to pay as little as possible for the car, I want to get as much money as possible for the car, and we ain't ever going to see each again after this, on we go. There are a variety of approaches you take to that, and that tends to be more of sort of the traditional negotiation, the haggle, the how you go through the process, the at the end, oh, there's one more thing I need, etc.
Sure.
But as you noted, with most of what we're doing in the employment relationship, and even increasingly in organizations, relationship between customer and supplier, between organization and vendor, these are not one-off relationships or one-off negotiations. These are relationships.
Yes.
So as a student, as a new employee, is thinking about negotiating with an employer, they should be thinking about this as, how are they building the relationship? This is not a one-time thing, just as the employer is not looking at this as a, how do I just get this new employee as cheaply as possible, but they're looking to build a long-term relationship. And that changes a lot about the dynamics of how you approach negotiations.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this conversation, we're focusing more on those relational ones. So not the one-off. So not just, I want the lowest price, you want to sell it for the highest price. So why negotiate? Let's kind of frame the conversation as a starting point around a first job, right? So I'm a student. I'm thinking about what I want to do after college. I get this job offer with X salary and Y benefits. Do I just take that? Or do I negotiate?
You negotiate. And you're starting your image within the organization.
Yes.
So as a leader in an organization, you're looking at this person that you've hired, you've interviewed, you've decided they made sense, you've made them an offer. You're still making an assessment about their skills. You're making an assessment about how they fit in your organization, where they're going to go. You're getting acclimated to each other. Typically, if an individual just takes the initial offer, that doesn't show a lot of moxie necessarily on their part. That doesn't show maybe the appropriate sophistication. Typically, in the initial salary or in other career advancements, there's some back and forth, and that's appropriate. Some employers are a little frustrated with younger generation folks that are maybe a little more focused on that negotiation and in some different ways, but not just accepting the initial offer and saying, okay, here's a counter. Here's what I would like. Are any of these things possible? And we get into details.
Absolutely.
Is an important, I think, image thing in addition to not wanting to leave too much on the table.
Absolutely. So it's almost like generally an employer is going to expect some sort of negotiation.
That is correct.
Okay, fair. So I think often when I'm working with students, they are very focused on the number, and that number is salary. And that's what they're thinking they can negotiate. Could you talk about what else someone could negotiate beyond just a salary?
Sure. And from a career development perspective, advice to students, don't focus on the number. Now I realize it's tempting to do that. They've been a student. They don't have money. They have student loan debt. And making a salary is a big thing, and they've got loads of expenses and all of that. And so it's very easy to want to focus on the initial number of my first job.
Yes.
But it really doesn't matter in the long run.
Sure.
Much better question from a student perspective is a new hire perspective, and from an employer perspective is, what skills am I going to be developing? Where am I going to be 6 months, 3 years from now after I've been in this job? How will I be more valuable to this employer? How will I be more valuable in general? The cold reality is your education doesn't end when you walk off the stage and we hand you a diploma. Sorry. Growth and development is a lifelong learning process, so that you should be thinking about, how will this job help prepare me for my long-term career?
Yes.
So, first of all, as a person applying for a job, you should be taking a much broader focus than just the number. So you should be thinking about, what kind of assignments will I have? What opportunities will I have for professional growth and development? To what extent will this organization support that growth and development? Is there a professional group? I'm an HR person, so there's SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management. That's a professional group. There are a number of SHRMs in the state, and then there's a state level of that. And those regional organizations have typically monthly kind of meetings. Well, one of the things you could ask is, would it be okay if I went to the monthly local SHRM meeting, the Fox Valley, the Oshkosh, the Fond du Lac, whatever it might be? Can I attend those meetings?
Yes.
There's a membership fee. Would the organization provide financial support and pay for that membership fee? What else would they do that would help with my professional growth and development?
Yeah.
And back to the relationship, I think as an employer, I'm impressed by the individual who comes in and says, I'm interested in, we talk about salary, but I'm also interested in my professional growth and development and how I'm going to be stronger and better and more capable for the organization 3 years from now than I am today. That says something about a long-term perspective. That says something about maturity. And it says something about the value that employee might be able to bring to you in the future. So I think those are all positive things to think about in the negotiation. Doesn't mean you don't counter on the salary.
Sure.
But there's some other things that are probably more important to you in the long run and more impressive to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of buckets of things you could negotiate on. One could be salary, though we've talked about some pros and cons to that. Another bucket is this professional development, certifications, opportunities, educational reimbursement, that sort of thing for continuing education. And then another could be benefits.
Absolutely.
Because benefits can make up to 40-50% of your total compensation. What are some of the benefits you can negotiate?
Well, this is a fascinating one, and this is one that has clearly changed over the years. Because, first of all, what aren't you going to negotiate? You're not going to look at the health insurance policy and say, oh, I'd love to work for the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, but I don't like this insurance policy. Buy me a different one.
Probably not going to happen.
Probably not. Now, if I'm applying to be the CEO of Oshkosh Corp, yeah, they'll probably buy you the insurance policy that you want because at that level you play that game. But for most, here's the insurance policy, or we have 2 or 3 options, pick one. So the number of those things are set. But there certainly are options to negotiate over other things that may be of value to you, such as vacation. So often organizations have a vacation plan policy, which is so many weeks of vacation, so many years of seniority. Well, could I negotiate that given the experience I've had as an intern, is that going to apply to my years of experience?
Sure.
Can I be accredited with
For
so
that
much
time.
seniority starting out so that I'm a little higher in that queue? Certainly is a thing that can be negotiated in organizations. Time off without pay.
Mhm.
We know that most people would rather have time than money. So if you go to most people and say, if you do something really great this year, Jennifer, which you will, we will give you a bonus that is either a 2% increase in your pay, a one-time bonus of 2% of your pay, or a bonus week of vacation. Which would you prefer? Most people would take the time off as opposed to the money,
Mhm.
about 80%.
Hmm.
It appears to me. I don't have a hard survey on that, but just from doing the hands in
Sure.
organizations, the vast majority would take the time. So what we're now seeing is young people are often, and some of us are catching on to it that are older, okay, one thing you can negotiate is for time off without pay. Could
Mhm.
I take another 2, 3 weeks
Sure.
off without pay? So that sort of thing is what we're seeing increasingly in negotiation. And employers are increasingly finding ways to accommodate that, think about that,
Mhm.
and hopefully this has evolved to where, oh, that's not a, what the heck are
Mhm.
they asking? This is weird and different. I never did it.
Sure.
It's now the norm and should be part of the discussion.
Mhm. And what about some other things to negotiate? A more flexible schedule, work from home days, 410s. What are some of those options?
Well, I think you've hit a number of them. There are things along the lines of stuff that would support me at work. So I would like to have this kind of computer. I'd like to have a laptop. I'd like to have this. I'd like to have a company cell phone. I'd like to have, a car. I'd like to have, but some of that might be just stuff I kind of want. But often these are things that will help me be more successful in my job
Mhm.
if I have these kinds of tools. It's a good thing for a prospective employee to ask, what would I need in order to be good at this job? What could the organization provide that would help me to be successful in this job? Could be a mentor. I'd like to
Mhm.
have somebody in the organization who's been around for a while to help me think about the organization, think about how to succeed.
Mhm.
So you may be thinking about a mentor. So there's a whole bucket of things that would help me be successful,
Mhm.
which may overlap with this bucket of sort of my work environment and my work schedule. Can I work from home? Can I work from the office? Do
Mhm.
I have to work in the office? Do I get to work in the office? Because some folks, depending on their own style, productivity, might say,
I
look,
like that.
I need to be in the office some because,
Mhm.
I'm married, I have 3 children, they're ages 2, 5, and 7, and being home with the kids is probably not going to be the ticket to my being productive.
Mhm.
So I want to be able to come into the office, or I like to be able to work from home. I like not having the distraction of other people around, so I think I can be more productive if I'm at home, or I just want to be at home because I don't
Mhm.
want to have to drive to work all the time. I don't want to have to get dressed up. I don't want to have to,
Mhm.
all the things associated with going into the office. So
Mhm.
you absolutely can negotiate over the question of being in the office or not. Some organizations that's totally negotiated. It's clearly on the table. Others have fairly firm policies. We have a policy that says people need to be in the office 2 days a week.
Mhm.
It's Tuesday and one other day, and this is the policy, and that's not going to be on the table. 410s is something that we see increasingly common,
Mhm.
and people will often be able to work a 410s.
Mhm.
Maybe there's some core hours in there is another approach.
Sure.
Look,
Mhm.
given my lifestyle, I want a morning type. I'm typically at the university by
Mhm.
7,
Sure.
6:30. After having been at the Y for an hour and a half, 2 hours,
Mhm.
I'm hitting campus early. But 4 o'clock, 4:30,
Mhm.
Dale's productivity is really waning.
Sure.
And, I certainly don't want to be doing stuff in the evening because I'm going to bed at 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
Well, okay, can we shift the schedule? Is it okay if I come in at 6,
Earlier.
leave at 2:30?
Mhm.
Maybe they're core hours. Want everybody to be in the building from 11 to 2. So those are hours we can schedule meetings. We do that a couple days a week. So that might be restricted.
Mhm.
But other than that, what flexibility do I have over when I come and go?
Sure.
Can I take off time during the day?
Mhm.
Some people, I want to hit it hard. I get here relatively early. I hit it. but then I want to take off from 11:30 to 12:30, 1 o'clock and go hit the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And that energizes me. I come back and then I'll hit
Ready
it
to go.
again.
Yep.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all things which in many cases can be on the table and you can at least raise them.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized we said 4 10s. You and I know what that means, but 4 10s would be working 4 10-hour days instead
Yes.
of 5 8-hour days.
Yes.
So still
Yes.
getting into that 40-hour work week, but
Still getting in the 40-hour work week.
different
And we
schedule.
know that employers are doing that, and the data indicates that 410s are equally productive, if not more.
Mhm.
There's no significant impact on accident rates. We don't find accident rates go up when you're working 410s.
Sure.
There's some advantages to, there's a certain amount of starting the day and ending the day,
Mhm.
and if you're doing 410s, there's one less start
Startup
and
and
end.
yeah.
Some organizations are going to an even shift beyond that where it's okay, you're working 3 10s, 11s, but you're doing a Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Mm.
And we see this in hospitals where,
Mhm.
look, if you'll cover 3 weekend shifts and make them a little bit longer, and beyond 10, we start to get into some productivity and health issues. But 10, 11 hours a day,
Mhm.
10-hour days, and you'll do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's a full-time
That's
gig.
full time. Mm-hmm.
So you're only working 30 hours a week, but we'll pay you for 40
Mm-hmm.
because people don't tend to want to work weekends.
Sure.
So there are a number of things that are flexible in organizations. Doesn't hurt to ask, doesn't hurt to have the conversation.
Yeah. Creative flexibility in this negotiation process.
It can be very much win-win.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we've got all these different things that students can negotiate on. Let's role play. Um, I I come to you with this job offer, and how do you respond on the spot? Do you wait? What's the appropriate way to handle that situation when you get an offer?
Well, let's go back to I'm trying to help create my image in the organization. If I'm hiring somebody in the organization and I want them to make decisions in the organization, help us make good decisions moving forward, I want them to be thoughtful about them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's some decisions that I want you to be able to make very quickly. Oh, do I use a blue pen or a black pen? Well, hopefully it's like, let me sleep on that and get back to you. Not the best answer. But if this is a significant decision, like accepting a job,
Sure.
it makes a lot of sense to immediately say something along the lines of, hey, I appreciate the offer. I'm pleased by this. Look forward to the possibility of working for the organization. I'd like some time to think about it. I have some mentors. I want to talk with them, and I just want to think about this because this is a really important decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps set the tone that you're a thoughtful person who, in significant decisions, you take a deep breath and you think about it before
Mm-hmm.
responding. I have found no employers that are, oh, no, 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 you have to answer this question right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were the response, I would be coaching a student of, unless you don't think you have many other job offers,
Mm-hmm.
I would be inclined to run from it. It's sort of the, I've got this deal, I'll sell you this product, but you have to decide right now, and then the offers go, well, wait, why can't I sleep on it?
Why not have time?
Yeah, what's your concern that if I think about it,
Yeah.
I may not like this deal? So I think it's very prudent to think about some time. My advice to students is ask the employer, how much time do I have? So I've got the offer, I appreciate the offer, rather than saying, okay, you gave me the offer on Tuesday, can I have until Friday? Okay, I want to think about this.
Mhm.
When do you need an answer?
You're
Because
starting the negotiation right there.
You're starting to negotiate. And one of the rules in negotiation is you never go first. You always want the other party to go first. So don't say, can I have until Friday? Can I have 3 days? How long can you give me? And
I
if
might say a week.
they may say a week. And if they say 2, you can come back and say, well, would 3 be? I mean, you can always respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues that potential employees, students often have is they've got multiple options in the fire.
Sure.
And so that might be another reason why you want to not respond immediately.
Sure. Slow play one to try to get your offer from your number one.
And how the offer comes is an interesting question. Often we'll find the offers come in an email format.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am looking to give myself some time to think about it, maybe there's another company that is close to making an offer or not that I want to be able to have in the mix,
Sure.
think about how quickly you need to respond to the email. Now, you get an email, in the morning, probably need to respond that day.
Mhm.
But if I get an offer that comes in Wednesday afternoon at 3, there's nothing wrong with waiting until Thursday to respond and then saying, how long do I have? So you can do a certain amount of dragging it out by not responding
Mhm.
in the first 10 minutes after an email comes in. Within 4, 5, 6 hours, you ought to be responding.
Yeah.
Certainly
Absolutely.
within the first 24.
Okay. Absolutely. So if I want to negotiate on a couple of different things, when we've had conversations in the past, it's good to give a menu of options.
Absolutely.
So I'm not just going to say, give me this dollar amount or nothing, because the other person, like you said, it's relational. You want them to feel like you're each giving and taking and working together to a positive solution for
Correct.
everybody.
Right.
So what does that look like?
Well, and part of this is you don't know what constraints the employer may be under.
Sure.
So this may be a scenario of they've offered you a salary of $50,000 and they really don't have much room to negotiate on that. They may have none. They may have a policy within the organization. We start people at this number. I'm going to be hiring 10 people into this job this year. I want to start them all at the same number from an internal equity perspective. So there may be no flex on that. There may be flex. Part of it is I want to listen to the offer. Is it, here's what we pay starting salary, or is it, we'd like to offer you X, why don't you think about it and get back to us? The second is almost begging for a counter.
Sure.
The first is not. One of the things we do know, and I'll get to this smorgasbord, is that, and organizations I think are getting better and we're more aware of it, but we do know that historically, organizations have been more likely to look at the mail and say, here's an offer, why don't you think about it and get back to us? Give signaling that we're open to a negotiation, more likely with a female to say,
Sure.
here's a salary, do you want the job or not? Maybe not quite that blunt, but we do know that there's some difference. So
Sure.
we have to be careful on the gender side,
Absolutely.
being equally as willing to enter into the negotiation.
Mhm.
Smorgasbord. As we think about particularly hiring someone at the beginning of their career, it's probably a 3-step dance. The employer is going to make an offer. The potential employee can counter, and then the employer is going to come back with a response, and you accept that response. Or decide, no, this is not the right job for you.
Sure.
Now, as you work up the organizational hierarchy, this might be not a 3-step dance, but a 12-step dance. I mean, we may go back and forth on responsibility and authority and all kinds of things before we even get to compensation, etc.
But
But
in
in
those
the-
first few jobs,
It's going to be a 3-step dance.
sure.
So the employer makes an offer. I like the concept of the potential employee comes back with a counter. And it has a number of items in the counter. And it's would any of these be possible? I'm not asking for all of this. Would it be possible? You've offered 49.5. Well, if you've offered 49.5, it feels to me like you're begging for a counter for 50 because people like nice round numbers. Okay. Could the salary move to or close to 50,000? Might there be a signing bonus? So you might ask for some of those kind of numbers. I actually would probably put first in my request those professional development things. Would it be possible for me to go to the monthly SHRM conference? Could I attend the annual state SHRM meeting? Could you
Sure.
provide tuition reimbursement? Those kind of questions I would probably put first because I like leading with things that are not just good for me, the candidate, but also good for the organization. I think that sets a proper tone. But you're going to list 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things. Are any of these possible?
Sure.
And my experience has been employers want to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to come back and say the answer is no, can't give you any of those things, but I think you're desperate enough you'll take the job. That doesn't help make this relationship
Especially in this
happen.
market.
Like, particularly in this market. Excellent point. So give them 3, 4, 5, 6 things. Would any of these be possible? Now, my bias is if this is a job that you want, it all looks good, I would actually start by giving up your power. I would start by saying, basically, I'm going to take the job. I look forward to working for your organization. I accept. I think this would be great. I look forward to starting with you on the identified date or whatever it might be. Would any of these be possible? Now, some people think I'm being stupid in that, well, they think I'm stupid for a variety of reasons, but we'll zero it to here. Think this is a stupid approach because you just told them you're going to accept, so they can say no to as much of that as they want, and they know you're still going to accept the job. Yes, but it's about the relationship.
Sure.
So they don't want to say no to everything because they want this to be a positive relationship. And I think it makes a fascinating statement to the employer.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to work for you. I look forward to this relationship. Can you do any of these? Great, fine. I'm effectively saying, and if the answer is no, I'm still going to take the job.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if anything, that ups the desire on the part of the employer to say, okay, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
I think it shows a certain professionalism. I've certainly taken that approach myself with a number of negotiations I've had over what are we going to do to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
When I negotiated what was I going to get paid as the assistant dean, um, I took the job. I actually was in the job for a couple of months before we got around to negotiating salary because there was just so much we needed to get done.
Sure.
And I told the acting dean at the time, Scott Byer, yeah, I'm taking this job. We'll talk about the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
but it ain't going to result in me not doing it. When I moved out of the assistant dean job into a director job and taking on an acting department chair,
Mm-hmm.
I told Dean Rao, look, let's talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
but in the end result, whatever you tell me, I'm going to take it.
Sure.
And I don't think people have tended to take advantage of me because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't. I think it's like, okay, fine, we'll work collaboratively,
Great,
see
let's
what we
work
can
it
make
out.
happen.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned 3 steps. So we're not going to ask for this different salary and then they come back and just keep negotiating.
Nope.
So be really intentional about what you ask for.
Be
as
intentional
your
about
counter.
what you ask for. And where this might be different is if you look at the offer and say, that's not really where I want it to be. We're a ways away from where I want it to be.
Sure.
Then instead of, a little 3-4% on salary, you might come back and say, look, the offer was at 35,000. My perception is that the market for people with my skill set coming out of college is people are making 50.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm coming back with a counter which is significantly different than the initial offer.
Mm-hmm.
And the employer might say, well, that's not what we had in mind. We're not in the right range. Or they may take a deep breath and go, oh, well, maybe we're off. And they do
Mm-hmm.
a little analysis of salary and et cetera and come back.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that they would come back with a counter to your counter and you would say one more time. Probably not, but
Sure.
you could.
It's possible.
It's possible. And if that's going to make the difference between I would take the offer and I wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and do it.
Sure, absolutely. And one thing to keep in mind with salary negotiation and all these other elements is where you're living. And so the cost of living, if I take an offer at 50 in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, my standard of living is very different than I've accepted an offer at 50 in downtown Chicago.
Absolutely.
So how do you do research so you're not just saying, I think it costs more to live in Chicago, and you're actually bringing some data to the conversation? Because I imagine that also speaks to you as a professional.
Absolutely.
That I've done some research, and here's why.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, the government does some things well and some things poorly, but one of the things the federal government does very well, Bureau of Labor Statistics does wage survey data. So you can get wage survey data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
Mm-hmm.
which is broken down by SMSA. So for the Fox Valley,
Mm-hmm.
there's a wage survey. Many states, the state of Wisconsin does a nice job of wage survey broken down to the SMSA, into a region, if you will. So you can get salary data that says, in Chicago, the average level, the range of pay for people as a entry-level marketing person is X.
Mm-hmm.
What is it in Oshkosh? What is in Denver? What is in San Francisco? So you
Sure.
get those kind of numbers. You can also get cost of living data.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, again, available from the Department of Labor, cost of living numbers that will tell you here's what it costs to live in various areas.
Absolutely.
Now this is getting to be a lot more interesting
Mm-hmm.
because of all the working from home. So if I'm in an environment where it's 100% work at home, it really doesn't matter if the job's in Chicago. Um, one of my sons has a job that is with a company out of New York City, but he's 100% remote. He's never physically met any of the people he works with. He was interviewed remotely, works remotely, etc. So cost of living in New York, well, kind of irrelevant. So in some organizations, this is evolving and changing.
Absolutely. And large organizations will typically do these sort of analyses to
Absolutely.
figure out
They have
what do
figured
our
all this out.
associates in different cities. But small to mid-sized companies may not have that
They may not have done that.
bench strength to do that in their HR teams. So that's
Correct.
where your research comes in.
Yes. And the large organizations probably have because they're moving people between. So it's not uncommon in organizations that you're paid X, but because you're moving from Wausau, Wisconsin to Chicago to Denver to San Francisco, your base pay is X, but now there's a cost of living adjustment because it is more expensive to live. And we see this hugely when you're doing international comp. And the cost of living in Paris is very different than the cost of living in Accra, the capital of Ghana. And, that will impact compensation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about identities that can make negotiation successful or more challenging, male, female. Anything else related to identity that you would share with folks as their negotiation just to be mindful of?
Well, part of it is the creating your image going into the organization. So we know there are some differences in terms of how people respond, males, females, race, etc. But when I talk to students about, okay, how do I position myself to get the job? How do I be the person they want in the interview? I tend to coach them not to do that at all. Be yourself. So I'm a guy. I have an earring. And that's kind of what I do is I wear an earring. I take the earring out for the interview. My attitude is no. If they're like, we don't want to hire you because you got an earring, is that really where you want to work? So I find that if people will take the approach, not of it's my job to sell you on who I am, but it's my job to be who I am. Have you tell me about the organization, and then we think about whether this is a good match. This is easier for me to say I have a job and I don't have a home loan. Then, yeah, it in my mind works much better. Be yourself.
Sure.
If they don't want you and who you are as a human being, then find another job. And in this labor market, you can do that.
You can.
There's no reason to fake it to get the job because it's not going to be a good fit. You're not going to enjoy the relationship long term.
So even through the application and the interview process, it sounds like you're saying that's where you're starting to build a relationship. Who are you? Who am I? Is this a match?
Right.
And then figuring out the details of
Yes.
compensation, benefits, professional development. Absolutely.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. Anything else you would add?
Just the concept of what do you do with multiple job offers?
Absolutely.
So one of the questions that students are often now dealing with, and employers are often now dealing with, is how do we deal with this fact that it's such a tight labor market? What employers have gotten much better at is figuring out how to shrink the time frame. So you apply for a job, and the concept is going to take us 3 weeks to get back to you and make a decision of who we're going to hire because we're going to interview, and then we're going to interview again, and we're going to do a drug test, and we're going to do this test and references, etc. We know that if we wait 3-4 weeks in this environment, the pool shrinks, and it shrinks the best have found other jobs. So employers are getting much better at shrinking that time frame. Many people who are out looking for a job will get multiple offers because of how competitive the labor market is. So if you're applying for jobs and you get an offer from company A, but you've maybe had interview 1 and you've got interview 2 scheduled in a couple of days with company 2, what do? Number of ways to approach it. You can just sort of ask for time, etc. My general approach, and I found this works out really well in life in general, is when all else fails, try telling the truth. Honesty can be, it's kind of a weird concept here, but I find that being honest works really well from both the employer and the employee side.
Yeah.
So I'm a student, I'm applying for a job, and I got an offer. There's another company that I'm well into the process of negotiating with and seeing if I'm going to get a job offer. going to company one and saying, hey, appreciate the offer. I'd like to pursue this. I do want to put cards on the table. There's another company that I have started the process with. I'm not going to be sending out any more resumes. I'm not giving out, but I would like to pursue this one to see how this works, and look at and weigh my options. I can't imagine the employer that says, oh, well, that's being stupid. That seems like a very reasonable thing to do after you've invested 4 years and all this money in going to college and getting an undergraduate degree, etc. So employers tend to be understanding of that. Now, as an applicant, I need to be understanding of I may be their first choice, but they've got a second choice that if they can't get the first, they don't want to lose the second. So they don't want this thing to drag out 3 weeks because I'm going to lose number two in this
Waiting
process.
for number one.
So this might be, okay, how long can you give me? Well, I can give you 4 days. Well, then maybe the phone call goes to company number two and says, hey, I got a job offer. I would take that job offer, but I'd like to pursue this relationship. This might turn out to be a better thing. I need to give them an answer in 4 days. Can you make that time frame happen? Can we expedite what we're doing to be able to make a decision about whether you want to make me an offer? And I find putting the cards on the table is often the best approach in life in general, but certainly in this scenario.
Absolutely. I mean, the alternative, right, is you accept job with company one and then later renege on it, and you've damaged your brand and your relationship with that company.
Yes, and that's a difficult question. I've accepted job offer with company A, and my intent was to take it. Now I got job offer B that is just a way better offer. Well, do I renege with A? And I don't view, in general, no. I think you want your word to be your thing. I have told the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh that it is my intent to work at least another year. I intend to be back in the fall. I've scheduled for courses, etc. But when I get home, there's a phone message for me that my wife has from Bill Gates, and he'd like me to work with him. And he's told me that he doesn't give a damn what I cost. And it sounds absolutely fascinating working with Bill Gates, and money is, yeah, I'm probably going to tell the university that I won't be around in the fall. Will be around the rest of the spring? Well, I'd see what I could negotiate, but there's scenarios where I might say, look, I'm gone tomorrow. There's no simple answer to that. Generally, when you say something, you should do what you say you're going to do. Are there extenuating circumstances, and then you go back to the first and say, look, I feel really bad about it. It was my intent to follow through, but this was such an ideal offer. I just really couldn't turn it down. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
And every situation is different. So that's where talk to a mentor, a professor,
yes,
and get perspective.
Get some coaching on it. That's
absolutely.
Good. The other thing that an applicant should be aware of, it's not uncommon that you go to employer one, and say, okay, I've got this other option and I'd like to pursue it, etc., etc. Some companies will come back with, okay, we've got an offer of $48,000 on the table. Here's the deal. We will offer you 51. If you will not pursue the other option, you'll sign with us today, we'll move 48 to 51. If the answer is no, you want to continue to explore the other option, that's fine. Our offer's 48. And then you got to take a deep breath, and they'll probably give you 8 hours or something a day.
Sure.
But you might be in a mode of you pretty quickly got to decide what you're going to do, because that is a technique that employers use to try and buy you out of the other option.
Absolutely.
Cool.
There's a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on, and students taking a more sophisticated approach to this, I think, is good for them getting a deal that is better for them, and it helps start them on their relationship in a much more positive way.
Absolutely. And to me, it's thinking, based on what you said, more comprehensively about starting the relationship with the employer and not negotiating on just one item, but really having it be, let's kick this off and let me demonstrate my professional brand as an emerging business professional.
And let me show you that I'm interested in how I can grow and develop and be more beneficial to you in the long run. I'm not taking a short run approach to this.
Absolutely. All right.
Very
Thank
good.
you, Dale.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And thank you all for listening to another It's Time podcast.